Hey guys, so sorry that I'm not at school with you. I am unfortunately at home with my son who is sick, but I figured that I would create a video going through the lesson that I was going to teach you today so that we can stay on track and you can hear kind of the lesson through what I would have taught you. So here we go. At this point you should have cut out your notes, the foldable from class, and had that glued into your notebook. So right now we're going to go through and we're going to fill that out together. So there are going to be parts in this video that you're probably going to need to pause so that you can get things copied down. If I'm ever going too fast for you to keep up with writing, just pause the video, catch up with what's on the screen, and then restart the video. So the first thing I want you to do is find a spot on your paper. That page, hopefully you've got a little bit of space on your page and you can look at the example in the notebook I left where you can write this down, but just a little bit of space to write down about simplifying. If you don't have space, put it on the next page or put it off to the side, but fit it in there somewhere. But you want to write down these 2 sentences about simplifying. So you can simplify up and down or on the diagonal, but you can never simplify side to side, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So pause the video, get that copied down, and then press play when you're ready to move on. Alright, so now that you have that copied down, we're going to start looking at how to multiply fractions, and I'm going to explain what that phrase meant in just a second here. So when we're multiplying a fraction by a fraction, so when we've got 2 fractions, this is probably going to be the easiest of the 4 operations for you to pick up on. So the first thing you're going to do is you are going to multiply the numerators together. So that is the top number of the fraction. So if we've got 2 fractions, you are just going to multiply straight across the top. And then after that, you are going to multiply the denominators together. And then step 3 is to simplify. But in parentheses next to where it says simplify, I want you to write first or last, meaning that this could actually be your first step or your last step. And I would actually recommend that it's your first step, that you actually start with simplifying and then you move on to multiplying the numerators and the denominators, and we're going to look at what that looks like right here. So you should see you've got some blank space underneath where you just copy those notes, and we're going to use that for examples of each of these. So in this one, I want you to write down the example 2/5 times 3/4. And what I want to point out to you is you'll notice that this year I'm going to be using this symbol, the dot, to represent multiplication. I want you to get in the habit of shifting away from using the x to mean multiply, because as we move through the year, the x is actually going to be used as a variable or a letter in our equations, and it's going to represent a number. So we want to stop using that for multiplication, and we want to start using this dot to mean multiply. Okay, so before we solve this problem, I want to go back to this phrase about simplifying. Okay, so what do I mean by you can simplify up or down or on the diagonal? So simplifying up and down is simply what you know as simplifying right now. So if I have the fraction 2/8, I know that 2 and 8 are both divisible by 2, so I'm going to divide both those by 2 to turn that into 1/4. So that's what I mean by simplifying up and down. I'm simplifying a number that's right on top of another number, up and down there. Okay. The other place when I multiply is I can simplify on the diagonal. So if I look at this example that I gave you, 2/5 and 3/4 are both in simplest form already, so those cannot be simplified up and down. However, the other place I can simplify is by checking my diagonals. So are there numbers on the diagonal that can be simplified? 3 and 5 or 2 and 4? And in this case, 2 and 4 can be simplified along the diagonal because they're both divisible by 2. So we're going to, before we multiply, we're going to simplify in that diagonal by dividing each of these by 2. So 2 divided by 2, that turns this into a 1. 4 divided by 2 turns this into a 2. And again, I recommend that you always look to simplify first before you multiply, because it's going to make your numbers smaller and more manageable and easier to work with. Okay, what do I mean by you can never simplify side to side? So again, real quick before we finish this example, what I mean by we can't simplify side to side is we can't do, if I had 2/3 times 4/9, for example, okay, I cannot simplify the 2 and the 4 and the 3 and the 9 because those are side to side, okay, or next to each other. So those cannot get simplified, okay. side to side. We always have to, when we're simplifying, we've always got to simplify something from the top with something from the bottom, just like we did here. We took a number from the top and found a number on the bottom that had a common factor we could divide by. All right, so back to this example, let's finish it off. Now that we've simplified, we can multiply through. So we've got 1 times 3, which is 3, and 5 times 2, which is 10. And the nice thing about simplifying ahead of time is since we've simplified first, our answer should be in simplest form when we're done multiplying. So 3/10 is our final answer. Okay, so let's take a look at another example of multiplying two fractions. So again, I'm going to start by looking for anywhere that I can simplify first. Okay, so up and down or on a diagonal. And right here, I see that 7/14, 7 and 14 are both divisible by 7. So I'm going to simplify by dividing those by 7. 7/14 turns into 1/2. Okay, and right here I can see why I'm simplifying ahead of time. I like that I'm going to now be multiplying 2 times 4 rather than 14 times 4. That's a lot easier for me to do in my head quickly and using mental math. I don't have to think as much about it. So simplifying ahead of time just really helps eliminate some of those bigger numbers and get them to things that are more manageable and easier to work with. Okay, so we've simplified. Here we go. We're going to multiply across. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 4 is 8. So our final answer there would be 3/8. Okay, so that is simplifying a fraction by a fraction. Let's go on in your notes and look at how we would how we would multiply a fraction by a whole number. So this is the second box in your multiplying fractions foldable. Okay, so our first step here, if we're multiplying a fraction by a whole number, is to write a 1 under the whole number. So anytime we have a whole number, if we want to turn it into a fraction, we just put that whole number over 1, and that makes it a fraction. After that, we should be looking at two fractions, so we're going to multiply the fractions just like before, and then we're going to end by simplifying those simplifying our answer or converting it into a mixed number. So let's go ahead and do another example here. We've got 2/3 times 5. Okay, one thing I want to point out, every year I've got people that try to shortcut or try to quickly go through problems. And I've always got a couple of people that look at a problem like this and they say, oh, I've got to add a 1 underneath that whole number, so I'm going to squeak a little 1 underneath there. I don't want you to be that person that just sticks a 1 underneath it, because then things are still not lined up. And people then rush through and they multiply by the wrong numbers when things aren't lined up. So instead of sticking just a little 1 underneath that, take the 3 extra seconds that it's going to take and rewrite this problem. So we're going to rewrite this then as 2/3 times 5/1, and you can tell that by rewriting it, now I've got everything in a nice row, everything's lined up, and it's very clear when I multiply straight across what gets multiplied by what other number. Okay, so now that I've got two fractions, I'm checking to simplify. Is there anywhere I can simplify up and down or on a diagonal? And when I look at this, there is not anywhere that I can simplify, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply. So 2 times 5 is 10. 3 times 1 is 3. Okay, at this point, I have an improper fraction for my answer, so I'm going to do the second part, which says I'm going to convert it into a mixed number. So we reviewed this earlier this week. Again, we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does 3 go into 10? And it goes in 3 whole times, which is 9. How many left over to get from 9 to 10? The answer there is 1. So it's going to be 3 1/3 as my final answer here. Okay? So what I want you to do now that we've done that is find a spot underneath. Hopefully you didn't glue all of your notes down. You didn't glue them into your notebook. You can lift that flap up somewhere underneath. Go ahead and try this one on your own. So pause the video, try it, and then unpause the video when you're ready to see the answer. All right, so at this point, hopefully you have tried this problem. Let's look and see what happens when I rewrite the whole number over 1. I have 2/1 times 4/9. Okay, I'm looking to see if there's anywhere I can simplify. And when I check to simplify, I'm looking up and down or on my diagonals. And looking at this, I don't see anywhere that I can simplify. Again, I cannot simplify side to side, so I'm going to leave the 2 and the 4 as is, and I'm going to multiply straight across. 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 9 is 9. 8/9 is my final answer. Okay, so that is multiplying a fraction by a whole number. Let's end with this last piece in your foldable, which is looking at multiplying mixed numbers together. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do when you're converting, or when you're multiplying mixed numbers, is you're going to convert your mixed numbers into improper fractions. So we're taking those mixed numbers and we have to put them in fraction form. So convert those into improper fractions. Once we have them as improper fractions and we're looking at two fractions again, we're going to multiply those fractions just like we've been doing. And we're going to end with that same last step of simplifying. Or if we end with an improper fraction, converting that back to a mixed number. So the example we're going to do on this one is 1.5 times 2 1/5. Okay, so our first step is to convert these into improper fractions. So to do this, I'm going to take my denominator, so 2 times 1, the whole number, which is 2, plus the numerator is 3. So that's going to give me 3/2. Notice I didn't take my 3/2 and write it on top of the 1.5 that was already there and try to scribble it up here, because that just gets sloppy and hard to read. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it, take the extra couple seconds it takes to rewrite that underneath. Then I'm going to do 5 times 2, which is 10. 10 plus 1 gives me 11/5. At this point, I've got two fractions, so I can check and see if there's anywhere to simplify. And as I check my up and down, or my diagonals, there is nowhere to simplify, so I'm going to multiply straight through. 11 times 3 is 33. 2 times 5 is 10. That is an improper fraction, so we want to convert it back to a mixed number. 10 goes into 33 3 times, which is 30, and there are 3/10 left over. So 3 out of 10 left over. Okay, so again, the biggest thing to remember here is that those mixed numbers have to turn into improper fractions. I want to be looking at two improper fractions before I can multiply. Okay. As we get ready to wrap up here, I just want you to try a couple on your own and make sure you've got these. So here are two example problems I'd like for you to try on your own. So again, find somewhere, maybe under the flap that you glued down or on a different page, and try these two problems. So pause the video, get answers, and then when you're finished, I will go through the answers with you. All right, hopefully you've unpaused because you finished those two problems. So here we go, let's look at how we get our answers and what the answers are. So for this first one, we're going to do 3 times 2, which is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7/3. Again, we have to put this in fraction form before we can multiply. Okay, now I'm going to look, is there anywhere I can simplify? And hopefully you saw that on this diagonal I had 2 3's, so 3 and 3 are both divisible by 3. So I'm going to divide both of those by 3 and turn them both into 1's, and then I'm going to multiply and get 7/4. 7/4 simplifies down to 1 3/4. Okay, just a side note, if you didn't see that simplifying that could have happened ahead of time, let's look and see what would have happened. If you didn't simplify first, you would have gotten 21/12. And if we look at 21/12, that's still an improper fraction, so we want to simplify that down to a mixed number. So 12 goes into 21 one time, which is 12, with 9 pieces left over. 1 9/12. 9/12 can be simplified, and that actually simplifies down to 1 3/4. So you'll see that even if you don't simplify first and you just multiply and wait to simplify at the end, you should still get the same final answer at the end. It's just a little bit smaller numbers when we simplify ahead of time. All right, this last one, 1 1/3 times 2 1/2. Turn 1 1/3 into 4/3 and 2 1/2 into 5/2. If I'm looking to see if there's anywhere I can simplify, I'm seeing that I can simplify again on a diagonal. So 4 and 2 are both divisible by 2. If I divide each of those by 2, I get 2 and 1, and then I can multiply. 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 1 is 3. 10/3 is an improper fraction. 3 goes into 10 3 times, with 1/3 left over. All right, hopefully that is a good quick overview of multiplying fractions and mixed numbers. The dividing foldable we will be getting to next week, so just keep that glued into your notebook. You're going to use your notes and any part of this video that you need to rewatch to do the homework tonight. So your homework is that multiplying fractions and mixed numbers worksheet. Do both sides of that and bring that with you on Tuesday, and hopefully everybody at my house will be healthy by then and I will be back at school with you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Email me with questions. Ask the substitute if you have questions, and I will see you next week. Talk to you later.